most of my work is corporate now with a lot of leadership training and CEO work. And so I tend to work a lot with people who have businesses or small businesses, this sort of thing. And I work with making their companies better, but I also have to work with their own issues, because if you know leadership at all, if a leader's very dysfunctional, the company will be dysfunctional too. Some of you are going, yeah, I work for a company like that, right? So I have to help the leaders be less dysfunctional so the company's healthier. I worked 1 year with 3 different companies where the 3 leaders of the companies had identical, they didn't know each other, different parts of the country, had identical addictions. And it was alcohol, in this case, three alcoholics, and they were also depressed because alcoholism and depression go together a lot. And the same thing you always notice in depression. The mood went away, lower energy, hopeless feelings, feeling stuck, disconnection from people, as well as too much drinking. Now there's leader, let's call him CEO A and CEO B and CEO C. As we dug down underneath CEO A, guess what we found? We found a guy who was totally isolated. He had what we call a detachment disorder. He could not connect. He could not be vulnerable. He could not open up. He could not let people know who he really was. Totally isolated. If you saw him, you'd love him. He's just a great guy, but he wouldn't let anybody in. You ever had a friend like that when you say, "How are you doing?" and they go, "I'm fine. How are you doing?" And they look very social because they care about people, but they don't let anybody care about them. Some of you are like this in this room. A high percentage in a group like that on a bell curve are like that. You're really good with other people, but you don't take anything in. You don't let anybody care about you, anybody ask how you're really doing. You don't let yourself be vulnerable to these sorts of things. So his heart was empty. His heart was empty. So guess how he medicated that empty, hurting heart? Alcohol. Another part of the country is CEO number B, letter B. And he didn't have an isolation problem at all. You know what he had? He was a people pleaser. People pleaser. Always afraid of letting somebody down. Always afraid of hurting someone's feelings. Walking on eggshells around people. I don't want to fire this person. I don't want to have a tough conversation with this person. I don't want to make him feel bad. And we call that codependency. Has anybody ever heard of the word codependency? Kind of fits with a book called Boundaries. I don't know if you've ever seen the book. These guys wrote these books about. Kind of good. He had no boundaries. Total people pleaser. And guess what happens to people who are people pleasers and codependent? Guess what happens to their energy? They experience a thing called burn out. Right, burnout. He was totally burnt out. Couldn't get energy, couldn't get up in the mornings. And guess what he did to medicate his burnout? He drank too much. Substitution. CEO letter A was substituting over an empty heart. CEO number B? That's number B's not a letter B. Can you just kind of coach me on that sort of thing? CEO letter B was a people pleaser and was burning out, giving out energy. Then there's CEO letter C, another part of the country. He had a merciless judge in his mind where every time he screwed up or made a mistake or made a bad call or a bad decision, this judge in him would beat him up. How many of you how many of you know somebody personally who's a perfectionist? If you know personally somebody who's a perfectionist, what kind of nurturant things does your friend say to themselves when they screw up? What's wrong with me? You're an idiot. There you go again. What a loser. You'll never get it right. And it's the judge in our heads. Paul calls it in Corinthians, he calls it a harsh conscience. Some of us have a overactive, harsh conscience that gives us no grace at all. And it beats us up and beats us up. And so his perfectionism was affecting work, and he was beating himself up, and he had a big company. But guess how he was medicating the hurtful statements of his judge? Too much alcohol. Now, we could go on and on about that, but I want to make the point that you can have 3 people with an identical issue or identical problem, but a very different cause of the problem. Jesus said it this way. In Matthew 7, he said, a good tree makes good fruit, right? And a bad tree makes bad fruit. And if you're going to deal with an addiction, you've got to deal with both. You've got to deal with the fruit, which is the habit, the behavior, the drugs, the whatever. And you've also got to dig underneath to find out, where is the tree? Is it the tree of isolation? Is it the tree of people-pleasing? Is it the tree of a harsh judge? There are more trees than that.